So first, kind of lead into this with a few thoughts that'll stir our minds a little bit. And I want to ask you a question to start with. How do you like to shop? What's, No. He says no. He just doesn't like it. Well, if you need something, what do? Oh, what'd you say? Go online. Call your daughter and she gets it for you. Well, actually, that's what I hoped I would hear. We go online a lot. In fact, I can't tell you the number of products that I bought over the last year. And I made an effort to look around locally. But you give up after a little while, especially when you got stores like Sears that, they just up and leave. And then you don't have that anymore. So in the back of your mind, well, I don't have that, so I'm just going to look online and get it. What's the advantage of shopping online? Right? Anytime. Yes, for now you don't have to pay tax. It may change. All right, delivered to you. And what's the cons of shopping online? Can't hold it in your hand when you're shopping online. You can look at it in a picture, depending on how good the picture is. Yeah. And what'd you say?
You may have trouble returning it if you want to.
Okay.
They'll charge you a restocking fee, which can be quite expensive.
All right. Well, yeah. Restocking fees, I don't know who thought that up. I have an idea where that came from, and I'm not going to say it right now. But that's a way of deterring people from sending things back, really. I mean, it was probably started when somebody said, you know what, it costs us to put this stuff back. Or it costs us to take it back and see if it's all right. But then they added the restocking fee. But what's the big thing about shopping online? If I need something, like I was coming up here one Saturday morning for a work day, and I needed something. I needed it Friday night so I could have it Saturday morning. I ended up buying it online. So what happened to me? Did I have it Saturday morning? No, I did not. And that, to me, is the big thing about shopping online. You have to wait regardless. It may only be 2 days. Do you realize you have a gigantic, humongous organization in this country that is still under construction, being built to provide you with products within 2 days, no matter where you are, no matter what time of day or night you order it. And still, it takes 2 days. I don't know. I wanted it tomorrow morning. We've got all that going for us in the world of online shopping, and yet we say, that's a little deterrent to shopping online. I have to wait. I have to wait. And that raises the question, what's our level of patience with this process? And we may have been coddled into a low level of patience. But still, do we have that patience? I ordered something on Amazon the other day, and I didn't look where it was going to come from. And I thought, 2 days, okay, I can wait 2 days. It said it'll be here by June 29th. And you know where it's coming from, too. Yeah, oh yeah. So what we're going to talk about is patience, which is long-suffering. In other words, the ability to withstand conditions over a period of time, whatever those might be. And then another version of what we might call patience, which is also easily translated into the word endurance. So long-suffering and endurance, two aspects of the same topic. Now, before we even start, let me ask you what Paul said in 1 Corinthians about the gifts of the Holy Spirit. Which ones would remain after all the others had faded away? Which three would remain? Faith, hope, and love, right? And what did he say was the greatest of those? Love, yes. And he described love, right? In that passage. And what's the first characteristic of love? Right. Patience, long-suffering. So think about that as we study tonight. By the way, who said let your yes be yes and your no be no?
Jesus.
All right. In Matthew 5, Jesus talked about that, right? And he actually finished that little passage by saying that we should say yes or no. But James, quoting that same little talk that Jesus gave, said, let your yes be yes and your no be no. How about that? A little trivia there. And we're going to read it in just a few minutes. So we're talking about a call to patience in James chapter 5. We'll read verses 7 through 12. Now, some of this you may not think fits, but I'll tell you how most people say that it fits when we get to it. And remember, he's just said, you rich people, you better think about what you're doing here. You're fattening your hearts, and the day of slaughter is coming. You condemned and put to death the righteous. He does not resist you. Move straight into this, and a lot of people say that this has changed the tone of what he's saying completely. We'll talk about that too. Therefore, be patient, brethren, until the coming of the Lord. The farmer waits for the precious produce of the soil, being patient about it until it gets the early and the late rains. You too be patient. Strengthen your hearts, for the coming of the Lord is near. Do not complain, brethren, against one another, so that you yourselves may not be judged. Behold, the judge is standing right at the door. As an example, brethren, of suffering and patience, take the prophets who spoke in the name of the Lord. We count those blessed who endured. You've heard of the endurance of Job and have seen the outcome of the Lord's dealings, that the Lord is full of compassion and is merciful. But above all, my brethren, do not swear either by heaven or by earth or with any other oath, but your yes is to be yes and your no, no, so that you may not fall under judgment. Now, verse 12, does it go with the rest of it? I'll tell you how some people describe this passage. In fact, this book describes it in this way. Be patient in your work And so he gives the example of the farmer, right? Be patient toward one another. In other words, verse 9, do not complain against one another. Be patient in trial, times of tribulation like the prophets endured. And be patient in your speech. Exhibit patience in your speech. So how that fits with taking oaths is a good, fertile topic for discussion. So that's the way this book was, and it's very well the way we could have done this tonight, but it's not the way I did it. So let's see what we have to think about. Is this a new topic or more from what he's been going through up until now? Well, I think it's very much connected to everything going all the way back to chapter 1, where there's some material in chapter 1 on patience. Be patient. And so he takes back up there where he left off, I guess you'd say. Certainly a new tone. He was modeling a certain kind of criticism of the rich that needed to be heard. And remember, these are not just Jews. These are Jews who were converted, and they were Christians. They were in the church. And so they should have been able to break the traditions of society that cause rich people to oppress the poor. And really, they needed this kind of thing. This is a good example of the early working of God's authoritative word in the church to bring about what the church should be. And so talking to those rich folks, he had one tone, and now he turns and says, be patient. Is he talking to different people here? Maybe they're all part of the same group, but maybe there's people in there who were oppressed. And, you know, he said these people, in verse 6, he said, they don't resist you. Well, they can't. I mean, if they're in court, they're being testified against in court. What are they going to do? They can't resist. Then he turns and says, you know, folks, be patient. Be patient. Maybe he's talking to those folks within the same large group. These people, and it really becomes evident when you start studying Revelation. Revelation was really a gift to the church from God through the hand of John to make them feel like they could overcome what they were going through in these early years when the church was so oppressed. These people needed it just as much, even though this was certainly written before Revelation. Some of the things that developed later had not developed yet, but they were still hard times. They were going through bad things, and they needed to hear about the Lord's return and hear that it was part of God's plan. And so that would give them hope, and hopefully it would give them patience as well while they were waiting to see what the Lord would reveal to them about their lives and about what His plan was. And so we talk about farming, and farming is not something I'm terribly familiar with. I had an experience where I had a big garden. Well, I've done that twice, once with Shirley and once before I met Shirley. And both times we were strictly amateurs. Somebody told me I could plant a garden, and They actually took a harrow and plowed me up a great big plot of ground, and so I went to the store and got some seed. I planted some okra, and the man came out there later and said, "How much okra did you plant?" I said, "Well, I got 2 50-foot rows of okra." He said, "Son, you need to open a store. That's enough to feed the whole county." So I'm not real familiar with it, but one thing you can tell just from reading this passage is that there's work involved and there's patience. I mean, the farmer prepares and prepares and prepares. The farmer prepares starting the year before. You know, the way that you harvest a field and what you leave in the field and the way you leave it is part of your preparation for the following year to have a good crop. And from that time until everything's planted, there's preparation work going on. And it's all in the hope that stuff's going to come up, the rain's going to come down, and it's going to bring fruit. None of that is guaranteed. I don't know if I could live that way, where every year you do something that is not guaranteed and you are not the final authority on whether it works or not. Now, there are a lot of advanced methods in farming today, but still, a lot of uncertainty, and it requires patience. Patience for the rain to come, patience for the crops to grow, and only then is the farmer rewarded. And, you know, he's talking about the coming of the Lord. He says, it's at hand. It's in the works. I think that's what it means. You know, there are people confused about this. I wish you'd let me teach Thessalonians sometime. They were all eaten up about it. The coming of the Lord. What are we going to do? Should we do anything or just sit here? Sit here and wait. You've seen people, I don't know if you've ever studied the origin of some religious groups, but some of these groups got started by people saying, the Lord is coming and we've got to quit what we're doing and just sit and wait. But he tells them the coming of the Lord is at hand or is near. But he wants them to live their lives with patience in the meantime, because the fact that it's in the works doesn't mean it's actually happening to them. And we know that full well after these many hundreds of years later, that God's plan unfolds over a long period of time. And he said there's prophets suffered. The prophets were doing the will of God, and they were speaking the message of God, and still bad things happened to them. Even when they did what God asked them to do, sometimes the things that happened as a result happened to them as well as the other people. Now, if you ask that it shouldn't rain, and then it doesn't rain on you either. And it goes 3 years without raining. So, whether by other people or by events, the prophets had to have the patience to get through the things that happened to them. And the reason we know about the prophets and we read their message in the Bible is because they endured. And look in verse 11. That's where you see, instead of just saying long suffering, this is the word for endurance. We count those blessed who endured. And he talks about Job there. Now, a lot of the authors that you read about Job say, Job overall, from from chapter 1 to the end, overall, Job is a model of patience that you just can't top his example in patience. Patience with his trials, patience with God and God's will, trying to figure out what God's will would be. Lots of patience. But at any given moment, Job might not be seen as containing himself or having total wisdom in the situation. They say verse 11 of chapter 6 is a good example of that. He's kind of asking, why should I have patience with this? So he had his struggles, but he was an example of patient endurance. And then finally, the passage reminds us that we can have patience in our speech. So we got to think, what is one's speech like if one is patient? One might be able to fluently speak the language of love. Have you ever heard of that book called The 5 Love Languages? We did that study in here one time, didn't we? Where somebody told us what the 5 love languages were and said, do this questionnaire and you'll find out which love language is yours. Unfortunately, Shirley's love language is she needs help with the things that she has to do each day. And so I thought, well, oops, I better see about that. So some people's, we have some people in our family and we decided, oh, okay, that person, their love language is receiving gifts. If you buy something for them, give it to them, they really think you love them. Different languages of love. But anyway, in your speech, if you've got patience, then it comes through that you can exhibit agape love, let's call it that, agape love for another person without any trouble or without hesitation. Now, people who are frustrated all the time, what are they going to do? Their speech is going to show that, right? And what's the most popular way of showing frustration in our society? That's good. I didn't think of that. She said, put it on Facebook. Well, I'm thinking if you and I are just standing there and you need to exhibit some kind of extreme frustration, what's the way? Okay, what'd you say? Yeah, she said somebody might come up and curse somebody or say something that maybe they shouldn't. So yeah, society. I'm telling you, this is like a recreational sport among a lot of people. Swearing and cursing. Now this is all about oaths, and it's kind of related back to the fact that some religious people, and these Jews would know it because they came out of Judaism, would make an oath to somebody or would act like they were making an oath to somebody. And so, they'd say, I swear that this will happen or I'll do this. And then they would identify some kind of technicality where they said, well, we're not bound by this oath because over here it says if this is the conditions of this oath, then it's not binding. And so, going around I swear this or I swear that, and then it doesn't happen. So that doesn't even sound good to us because we've read it in James and we don't do it. So he says, don't do that. Be straightforward, be honest. This is what Jesus said. kind of like, look me in the eye and tell me what you mean. And if you mean yes, say yes. Don't swear it to me. And if you mean no, say no. It's like, I can take it. Just be straight with me. Have the patience to be direct. And tell me the truth in love. Remember this. If you want to identify a godly characteristic, patience is such a thing. God is patient. 1 Peter 3, we read in the days of Noah, God had patience during the preparation of the ark. Just like the farmer in the preparation of his crop. God was preparing to save humanity from what he was going to send, and he was patient in that effort. And it took a long time. Romans 9 says that God endured with much patience vessels of wrath. That's like people prepared for destruction. We've already said that love is patient. And God is love. Second Peter 3. The verse indicates that we should count his patience as the equivalent of salvation. So if you say, I am interested, I am coming to study the Bible and I'm interested in salvation, well, then you're interested in God's patience. Also, 2 Peter 3, down in verse 9, great popular passage that we use a lot. And it says, not wanting that anyone should perish, not wishing for anyone to perish, but all to come to repentance. That's prefaced by the fact that he is patient toward his hearers. He is patient toward you, not wishing that any should perish. So it's a godly characteristic. And that's, in and of itself, a good reason for us to pursue patience. Some things we should think about in relation to this topic. We mentioned the Thessalonians. The Thessalonians, to me, went to the extent of having problems. And this verse that you see in 2 Thessalonians about, he who shall not work, neither shall he eat. How did they get in a situation where somebody wouldn't work? Could it possibly be that person had decided so fervently that the Lord was coming immediately that they just quit what they were doing and sat down? It's entirely possible in that group, even more so than you would see today, I think. Galatians 5, the fruit of the Spirit. Patience is certainly included. In Luke 8, the telling of the parable of the sower. And the end of the parable, as told in Luke, says the good soil bears its fruit with patience. In Ephesians 4, we talked about Ephesians 4 a lot when we were talking about faith and works and so forth. So that starts by saying, walk in a manner worthy of the calling that you received. with all humility, gentleness, in patience, bearing with one another in love. 2 Timothy 3. In other words, you would be emulating the patience that have been exhibited by your teachers. And in 2 Timothy 4, as we respond to the message that is brought to us, we should do so with all long suffering, or with every bit of patience that we can bring to it.